to Eye on Horror, the official podcast of iHorror.com. This is episode 130, otherwise known as Season 7, Episode 11. I am your host, James J. Edwards, and with me, as always, is your other host, Jacob Davison. How you doing, Jacob?
Tired and sore. Been working the Super 70s series at work, and man, those 70mm prints are heavy as hell, man. It's just those things are very heavy. They're like upwards of 40 pounds, and they're very bulky. So, it's like several prints. So, it's a lot of back and forth. But my gains are going to be incredible by the end of the month. I'm going to be swole as hell.
Also with us, as always, is your other host, John Correa. How you doing, Correa?
Doing great. And I'm really excited that Jacob is making sure that those 70mm prints are going, because if anything goes wrong during the screening, I'm going to have Streets of Fire on 70mm. There will be rage. Rage, I tell you.
There you go, all Willem Dafoe on us.
Oh, man, I'm so excited. This will be the second time I've seen Streets of Fire on 70mm, thanks to American Cinematheque. So very excited.
It is a staple.
Last time it was a double feature of Last Action Hero and Streets of Fire on 70. And that was one of the best double features ever.
Cool. What's been going on? I know that Korea and I have finally caught up with Longlegs.
Oh, yes.
That movie does not fuck around.
Yeah, that's some scary shit
at all. That is, oh my gosh. Right from the very beginning, like literally pre-credits scene, you're like, yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm glad that Longlegs has come out to such a massive success and that people are scared by it, because it is really unsettling and one of the best horror movies to come out this year, if not the last several years. And definitely, it's just the combined talents of Micah Monroe, Nicolas Cage, and director Oz Perkins. Just Nicolas Cage has done a lot of movies in his lifetime, but I think it's fair to say that this is the scariest. He's a nightmare human being in this film.
Yeah, I think you're right. It is the scariest. It's not getting all the raves, though. There are some people, there are some haters, like our old friend of the podcast, Alok. The producer of 1BR, he was not as big a fan. But also the woman who owns the site I write for hated it.
Okay.
And we were at the same screening, and after we discussed it, she's all, "Do you want to write it up?" And I'm like, "Well, I will absolutely write it up, but I'm warning you, it's going to be a really, really positive review." And she was like, "I don't even want to think about it again. So yeah, you write it." She really didn't like it, but yeah, I did a rave on it because I loved it.
Well, art is subjective, not everybody's going to go for it. Plus, I feel like it's the typical case with every year or two, whenever a movie comes out, it's like, oh, it's the scariest movie ever made. And, people just kind of hype themselves up so much, or like overestimate so much on it that they'll see and it's like, oh, it wasn't that scary or something. So, it's kind of a blowback from that kind of thing. But still, the marketing for Longlegs is some of the best that has been done for any horror movie in recent memory. Like all the ambiguous teasers, the cipher coding, the viral marketing stuff with like the crime scene pictures. Like
Alok's problem was that the marketing made it better than it was. He compared it to Smile and how the marketing for Smile was like brilliant.
Right.
So I think that it just didn't live up to the hype for him. But what Becky said is that she thought it was stupid. And she thought that Nicolas Cage, that the makeup and prosthetics were ridiculous. And I'm like, oh, dude, no, that's what made him horrifying.
It was uncanny, man.
Yeah. The fact that his entire face is pretty much covered. And what makes him horrifying is that sing-song voice he would do, oh my, I'm getting creeped out just thinking about it.
Yeah. I've seen some comparisons to Tiny Tim, and specifically his performance in the horror movie Blood Harvest.
Yeah. Which was always brilliant, because Tiny Tim was the scariest part of Blood Harvest, and he wasn't even the villain.
Yes. The irony.
But also the most sympathetic character in Blood Harvest. Like, honestly, you bring up Blood Harvest, I'm going to rant about it, because like Tiny Tim is absolutely brilliant in that movie. And that movie, it's just so strange how he ended up in that. But I see those comparisons. I even said, I was like, yo, it's Tiny Tim in Blood Harvest meets Nick Cage in Face Off. As far as his performance, like, what it felt like was, but it was those were the influences. It was definitely something different. I liked it a lot. I could definitely see how someone after the marketing campaign would think it was one movie and come in and it be presented with something different. Because it's I'm not saying that they pulled a Drive, where some of the trailers for Drive made it look like it was Fast and Furious. But if you're expecting something that's like straight up horror and you come in and it's a horrifying detective story, I can see being upset. It's also very slow, a really good slow burn. And a lot of people don't like that. I appreciated it for that.
Yeah.
Well, it wasn't slow in the respect. I mean, we'll talk slow burn on something else I've seen this week that is the opposite. But it wasn't slow burn in the case where like nothing's happening. I mean, it's deliberately slowly paced.
Right.
But I see what you're saying. It was a lot more occult based than I thought it would be.
Mm-hmm. Same.
But it was I mean, basically what I've been describing it as Silence of the Lambs if Clarice Starling is psychic and Buffalo Bill is into cryptography and the occult. That's what I've been telling people. Yeah. And there's no Hannibal Lecter in it, I guess. But
well, and that's the thing I really appreciated about it. Like you could tell that the film was in that style and also very influenced by like those 90s thrillers that were Silence of the Lambs, not knockoffs, but it became its own genre. You like Kiss the Girls,
Seven,
Along Came a Spider,
The Bone Collector.
Yeah, what paid Morgan Freeman's rent in the 90s. And it was very much so of those. It was what it did. They did. He did a lot of those movies. Aftershock.
I know. It's funny to hear someone say it out loud.
But I love those movies. Those were the movies that were like, it was like those in the big budget, like blockbusters, like Independence Day that were constantly in my parents' VHS players. So like I was in it. I was like, oh, you're doing one of those movies, but leaning harder into the horror of it. Hell yeah, I'm game. Plus, y'all know me. I love the occult shit. So once that stuff started popping up, I was giddy. I
didn't mind the occult stuff at all. In fact, it explained a lot of what was going on in the movie, but I didn't expect it. That's the thing. I think I was expecting more of just like a serial killer hunt without all that stuff, which, that's what the marketing kind of put out, like this serial killer taunting the police with these cryptograms. So the occult stuff was, I'd say, a pleasant surprise for me because this stuff made a lot of the movie make sense.
And Micah Moreau was too relatable, that character. Just the whole, like, do I have to socialize? Do I have to come out? I was like,
oh, my mom's calling about praying again.
Yeah, it's so weird that at the beginning of the movie, I couldn't decide. And I actually compared her in my review to Shelley Duvall in The Shining. And then, moment of silence, Shelley Duvall passed the day after I wrote. But anyway, you can't tell if her performance is bad or brilliant until you learn a little more about the background of the character. And then you realize that, no, this is brilliant, because she seems kind of wooden and unemotional and completely stoic. And then you realize, no, that's how that's exactly what this character needs to be, because Shelley Duvall is kind of the same way where it's like you think that the woman can't act, but then you realize that she's supposed to be that timid little mouse that because she's been abused for so long.
Although also I wouldn't say so much that Micah Monroe's character was timid. She was very methodical too. Like she wasn't timid. She was like kind of wooden and sterile and clinical, actually, is a better word for it.
Yeah. And which I think is a product of her past. She's just like a no bullshit FBI agent,
She always takes a few moments. A lot of those,
She has that intuition.
Yeah. Well, that's what they're saying. They're all, I don't know if it's intuition or if you're really psychic, but you know shit that's going to happen. Speaking of slow burn, I saw this movie called Starvaker. It stars the woman from Saint Maud. What's her name? Morfydd Clark or something? I don't know I'm probably not pronouncing that right. And also Matt Smith is in it too. And it is they are in the husband's parents' house. They've moved into it, and their son is starting to hear voices from this character named Jack Gray. Basically, the son is troubled and ends up passing away, and the woman, she's still feeling his presence in the house while the dad is investigating the past of the house and digging stuff up there. So it all kind of culminates, and it is one of those it's about an hour and 40 minutes, and there's about 20 minutes worth of good stuff happening in it. And the rest of it I mean, there's a kernel of a good movie in there, but it's just so padded and it just moves so slow. And also it doesn't help that I've never wished for subtitles harder in my life, because the Irish accents are so, thick, and they're like, already going out in the field. And I'm like, what? What the hell is that? But and the screener I had didn't have subtitles, so I had trouble following some things there. But yeah, it's a cool little, it's not really a ghost story. It's just more like it deals a lot with grief. It kind of reminded me of Lamb a little bit in how just cold and unsettling it was, but it was not as effective slow burn as Longlegs.
That's too bad. On my end, I've seen a couple of action horror movies or martial arts horror recently that was pretty fun. Have either of you guys seen that movie Kill?
I've heard about it.
That's the Indian
the Indian action movie.
Yeah.
Oh, dude, it was badass. So it's basically about this commando and his best friend from the army. Like he's trying to get back with his girlfriend because she's being put into an arranged marriage by her tycoon father, and they're taking a train to Bangladesh, or to New Delhi. And on the train, a ruthless team of bandits hijack the train. So he has to fight his way through like all the bandits to like try and save his girlfriend. And I had it pitched to me as the raid on a train, and it is pretty accurate because it is just not withholding on the violence. Like it's mostly like hand to hand and like weapons like knives and hammers and stuff like that, but like people get fucked up in this movie. Like there's blood and guts spilling and people getting absolutely brutalized. And yeah, the action is crazy. Like it's close quarters combats, and the choreography is just mind-blowing. Yeah, I missed it Beyond Fest last year, so I'm really glad I got a theatrical release because it is fun as hell and jaw-dropping on the stuff. Like, like there's like just one sequence, kind of like Snowpiercer, from like one end of the car to the other. It's just almost like a video game side scroller beat 'em up, where he's just beating up progressively bigger guys. And so like the biggest guy, the biggest bandit comes out, and it's just like they're wailing on each other. So yeah, I definitely recommend checking that out. And on the other side, I went to the Alamo's Notorious Weird Wednesdays, where they show a weird movie from their selections. And they were playing probably one of the most notorious Bruceploitation movies of all, The Dragon Lives Again. Which yes, okay, you get it. It's about Bruce Lee in the afterlife, like and he pisses off the king of the underworld, and he's like trying to settle in the underworld city where, I shit you not, the Godfather with his evil teammates, Zatoichi the Blind Samurai, James Bond, the Man with No Name, Emmanuel, and Dracula and his zombie army are trying to take over the afterlife. So Bruce Lee has to team up with Popeye and Kane from Kung Fu to stop them.
See, you almost lost me when you said James Bond, but then you went in with like Dracula, Popeye, and Kane.
Yeah. The brilliance is that he looks, the James Bond character is quite literally just some random white guy. Like
with mutton chops.
Like he doesn't look anything like any James Bond ever, except for the fact that he has a tux. That's it.
But all white people look the same.
They do. That's true. Yeah. No, it's definitely one of the crazier Bruceploitation films. And if you watch the documentary Enter the Clones of Bruce Lee, that was one of the later ones, because they categorized it in eras of Bruceploitation, where like the first round was really trying to be like people processing Bruce's death. And then after essentially people were able to process their grief, it became like, okay, well, if Bruce was still alive, what if he was in an Indiana Jones movie? What if he was in a horror
James Bond movie?
Yeah, what if he was in this? And this one was just like, what if he was in all of them?
Who plays Bruce Lee?
Bruce Long, who you may know better as the Beast from Kung Fu Hustle.
Okay.
The main bad guy.
Does he look like Bruce Lee at all?
Sort of, but they have an explanation where like one of the King of the Underworld's assistants says after someone dies, the body goes through a transformation, so they don't look exactly the same.
Yeah,
this is how it works.
There were times where they gave explanations on like why he looks different. Like I'm thinking Game of Death, where when they ran out of scenes very early on, and they were like, oh yeah, he had plastic surgery to look like someone else to go into hiding. And then later on in the movie, when he fights Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, they're like, oh yeah, it went back, for this scene.
Sorry, I started laughing too hard when you said fights Kareem Abdul-Jabbar.
Hey, that's one of the greatest fight scenes ever. That's the iconic Bruce Lee with the yellow jumpsuit. And that was actually him. They did shoot 2 scenes, but they stopped filming. He went to go do Enter the Dragon and then never came back.
That is nothing compared to Bruce Lee fighting Dracula and his zombie gang, where, spoiler alert, Dracula fights Bruce Lee, but the tide turns against Dracula, and also Bruce Lee's dressed up as Kato from the Green Hornet for some reason. So Dracula, as the zombies, holds him down. He's going to bite his neck, but Bruce Lee uses his super secret technique where he somehow grows a third leg and kicks Dracula in the face.
Well, Bruce Lee played Kato.
He did. That's why he was dressed up.
Yeah.
But in the context
that's
of the movie,
reason.
He had no reason to dress up as Kato for that scene. Just because.
Well, hey, it sounds like it's a fever dream kind of a movie. So
yeah.
It's great stuff.
Hopefully it'll be on the next Bruceploitation set from Severin.
I saw this movie called The Last Breath. Have you guys heard of this? It's a shark movie.
No.
It's a typical shark movie. It's about basically this. It actually is Julian Sands' last movie, his last role, which I didn't know. When I saw Julian Sands, I kind of did the research and I'm like, oh yeah, this wound up being his last movie. Julian Sands plays this old seaman who him and his first mate, they find, hey, I was hoping that would go by. He plays this old seafaring guy, and him and his first mate find this old warship that sunk in the area. I think they're in the Caribbean, and they're going to report it to the authorities. But the first mate's college friends are all down for a vacation, and they basically money talks, and they convince him to let them dive it. So they're diving the labyrinth of corridors inside this sunken warship, and of course sharks show up, so they're being hunted by sharks while they're running out of air in this warship. So it's a pretty typical shark movie. I mean, if you like shark movies like I do, you'll be into it, but there's nothing really that special about it except the fact that it's Julian Sands' last movie, which is kind of exciting. But also along the same lines, have you guys seen that movie Breathe that came out a few months back? It's the one about the Earth's atmosphere has become unbreathable and all plant life is gone. And Common is in it, and Jennifer Hudson. He has developed a thing that will cleanse the air so him and his family can live. But Mila Jovovich, however you say her name, she shows up with a couple other dudes, and they say they want to take a look at this thing so they can fix theirs. And of course, nobody trusts anybody, and they all start fighting. And and it's this post-apocalyptic world where no one can breathe. It's actually pretty bad. It's a cool idea, but they didn't pull it off very well, I don't think. It especially the very ending. The very ending is a complete cop out. You're like, oh God, really? I watched 90 minutes just for it to end like this. So, but it's a cool idea.
That's rough.
Yeah.
I hate it when something has a really cool idea and it doesn't like stick the landing. It's always rough. Well, in this edition of Korea's Book Corner, because speaking of cool concepts that nail it, I finally got around to reading Maniac of New York.
Oh yeah, I love that book.
Yeah, it's I've had volume 1 since the trade came out and just never got around to it. And then someone gave me volume 2 recently, so I was like, all right, let's sit down and read it. But it's written by Elliot Kalan, who did a lot of writing and producing for The Daily Show during the Jon Stewart years. He has the podcast The Flophouse. So he's used to satire.
Oh, and also he did Spider-Man and the X-Men, one of my favorite Marvel miniseries.
Yeah, so he's written comics before too, and the concept is it's everything that we always wanted from Jason Takes Manhattan, where it's a slasher killer masked loose in New York City, and the brilliance of it is it starts off with like what would be the finale of like a big budget slasher film where this guy Harry the Maniac is the killer, and he massacres 86 people in Times Square's on New Year's Day in 2016. And then it jump cuts to 2019, and reported sightings of Harry the Maniac in New York are treated like traffic reports. Like that's who is handling it on the news.
Does it show how he gets away in 2016?
And no, the last shot is him standing over a massive pile of bodies covered in blood, and then
they don't catch him.
Yeah, they don't catch him. He's just been running around New York, and occasionally, like a couple people die here, a couple people die there. They know there's like a Harry free zone for some reason, but
yeah, and nobody can stop him either because like he's killed a bunch of cops, and like bullets don't work on him.
But it's one of those things where everyone's just kind of accepted that it's a thing that occasionally someone will die by Harry and the next big massacre is inevitable and stuff.
Which is very American.
Does he respect the Harry free zone? I mean, how does that work?
Well, I've never been so enthralled, like sucked into a thing within the first 3 pages like this book has done to me. And I love it because it's all a satire about like gun control, and because of when he was writing it came out in 2021, so like it became about COVID too, about America's inability to like be like, hey, we should honestly do something about this and not just accept these horrible things. But also as a slasher, it works really well because these little hints, like one of the characters turns out to have like a past history with Harry before he came to New York, like a camp, like a camp story and all of that. There's a reason why there's a section of New York that never gets touched by Harry. But the first volume ends with him getting on to the first automated subway train in New York City. And it does not go well for about 200 people. And it's just so good. The second volume is called The Bronx is Burning. And he ends up in a school, like a private school. And that's one of those cases where I was like, oh, this could go either really good or go really like rough with like what you're doing with like this. And they handled it so well. And that one ends with him ending up in Yankee Stadium on opening day. So the body count is very high, but like it's really good, dude. As like a social satire, it nails it without being too preachy. As a slasher comic, it's enthralling, which is very surprising because, most of the time when I've read slasher comics like Jason versus Jason X and things of that nature, they're fun. But there's a difference between like reading panels and watching like, a movie of it. And so usually there's a bit of a disconnect, but they do such a good job of like, just like, no, I don't want to say elevating, but like putting a bit more weight behind what they're doing. Like they go through when he's going through the train, they do like panels where it's like, this is John. He was heading home to his wife and kids. He's not going home. And then it's like the next person. This is Stuart. He just got a divorce and is on his way to celebrate the next chapter of his life. He won't be able to do that, and it like goes like takes that moment to like, these are people, not just bantha fodder. So I highly recommend. There's each series is like 4 or 5 comics long, and they're on series 3 now. So a third volume should come out within the year, and I can't wait. It's such a good read.
I'm way more interested in this from your description here than I was just from you posting the cover in our chat group. Yeah, and because when I saw that, I'm like, I'm not, kind of Lost Boys. I'm like, I'm not into horror comics, blah, blah, blah. But this description that I'm kind of sold. I'm thinking I'm going to have to track it down.
And the artwork and lettering are amazing. Like the whole team did such a great job with it. It's such a cool comic series. If you need something to complete your summer reading challenge, I highly recommend Maniac in New York.
Yeah, no, I collected the whole series, and I think the best hook is that it took the concept of Jason Takes Manhattan and it nailed it better than anything thought possible.
Yeah. It really did, and I can't wait to see what they're doing with Volume 3, because how Volume 2 ends, it's like, where are you going to go from here? And then I have a couple of rapid fires. Did you guys see Thelma?
No.
Y'all need to see Thelma.
I got confused. Someone else asked me if I saw Thelma, and I had confused it with a 2017 movie about like a psychic girl. But I guess this one's about an old lady, right? Yeah.
It's June Squibb plays Thelma, and she's 93 years old, and she's the star of this action film, and it is cute. It is such a cute film. I love elderly shenanigan movies. I feel like that we need to bring that back. I'm hoping between this and Longlegs we have like a 90s subgenre resurgence. But it's Thelma gets ripped off for like 10 grand through a phone scam, and so it's her trying to get her money back. The whole movie takes place where I live in the valley.
The beekeeper.
I was gonna say we need a crossover. Thelma meets the beekeeper.
Thelma the beekeeper.
This is
Thelma's protecting the hive.
This is beekeeper at the speed of a rascal scooter. It is brilliant. It's June Squibb and Richard Roundtree, R.I.P. Who is, it's always great seeing him in something, but it's great seeing him in something where he really gets to like work. Like Richard Roundtree gives an amazing performance in this movie. It's fun, it's cute. Parker Posey's in it, Clark Gregg, Nicole Breyer has a small part in it, and it's a lot of fun. It features one of the best cool guys don't look at explosion moments too. So it's a nice little palate cleanse. So if you're thinking of doing a double feature, go see Longlegs and then go see Thelma to come back. I highly recommend it. And then I also finally watched the animated Batman 66 movies that they did a few years ago, which include Batman Return of the Caped Crusaders and Batman versus Two-Face. And they are so much fun. If you're a fan of Batman and the original Adam West, Burt Ward franchise, you got to watch these. The first one is very much so like, all right, what if Batman 66 had the budget to send them into space and have all of his rogues gallery there? They did such a good job of capturing the spirit and what the original series was, while also doing like modern references and modern storytelling. It's so good. But the second one, Batman versus Two-Face, was first of all one of Adam West's last performances as well, and what a great send-off. But just the brilliant casting, because they never featured Two-Face in the original series. They thought it was too scary for kids. So you finally get to see what Two-Face in 66 would look like, and what he looks like. It's William Shatner. They casted William Shatner as Two-Face, which is, he kills it. He is perfect in it. And not only that, but like you could see, oh yeah, it would be Shatner in 68, right? Like around that time, like he would have been Harvey Dent. Yeah, that's awesome. And it's so good. And yeah, again, if you ever watched a Batman 66 episode growing up, I highly recommend watching these animated films. They are so fun. Burt Ward is on like next level with his one-liners in it as Robin.
When you say the whole rogues gallery, is it just Joker, Riddler, Penguin, and Catwoman, or do they send up like King Tut and the Mad Hatter and Egghead? Yeah, are it all those guys too?
I'm telling you, they all pop up at some point. King Tut plays more of a role in the second one, but yeah, even Egghead pops up at one point. They cram a lot of story in those two, like 78, like they're only 78 minutes each, so it's a quick watch, but there's a lot packed into them. And they do bring back Julie Newmar.
That's what I was going to ask. Which Catwoman is it? Julie Newmar is my favorite. So
there's a brilliant bit in the first one where I think it's either Batman or Robin gets knocked on the head, and Julie Newmar's Catwoman is standing over him. He's like, "Whoa, I'm seeing three of you," and the other two Catwomen are the other two Catwomen. It's really, really good. Yeah, a lot of fun.
Yeah. Some quick rapid fires for me. Again, wanted to touch upon the Super 70s series we're doing with the American Cinematheque, where we're showing 70mm prints all month long for July. And it is really an experience to see a movie in 70mm, since it's so rare, and it is an incredible format. So far, I've managed to see Nope in 70mm, Backdraft, And oh yeah, oh how could I forget Howard the Duck?
Yes.
Yeah, Howard the Duck, 70 millimeter, baby. And it really does enhance that true cinematic classic.
Now, which of these movies is the heaviest?
Look, to be honest, I haven't lifted all of them, so
Okay.
I don't know. Like they, just it kind of depends on the shift, and also, I'm not there around the clock, but just in general, 70 millimeter prints are heavy. Like we even have an opening to our movies with a little video of Matt Burris, our main transporter, who talks about how much effort it takes to transport them, because collectively I think we're literally transporting over a ton of these film prints back and forth because there's just so many and they're so heavy, but again worth it because the sound visual quality of these movies are really outstanding. It's just such a fun experience.
Well, they're literally twice the size of a 35 millimeter print.
Exactly. 35 plus 35, that's 70.
Yeah. Maths.
A quick rapid fire from me. And I didn't realize that I had not seen this before, but I finally saw I'll Always Know What You Did Last Summer, the third one. It is a pretty serviceable remake of the first one. I mean, there's literally nothing new. It is exactly the same. The only difference is the first one does exist in it because that becomes a plot point where what happens is they one of the guys dresses up like the killer from the first one and chases people around, and the person he's chasing around accidentally dies. So that becomes the people who are behind the prank. It becomes oh no, we were responsible. And then, the killer, but there's more of a supernatural bent to it though. It's not like it's not like a slasher. It's more like a ghost story, but it's not nearly as good as the other two, but it's pretty much the same as the first movie.
The Lifetime original.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the thing. Yeah. It's like I Know What You Did Last Summer light.
And back on the big Hollywood horror releases, MaXXXine finally came out and I saw it.
All right.
Yeah, so did I.
Yeah, and I want to preface that I saw it on 35 millimeter at one of the only locations, the Vista Theater in Hollywood, which added to the experience because I thought it was so much fun. And yeah, no, it's just so funny how the series changes genres like a chameleon with every movie, because X is a slasher, Pearl is kind of a psychological horror movie, a descent into madness set in the golden age of Hollywood, and MaXXXine is kind of a grim and gritty 80s neon-soaked neo-noir giallo.
When you texted us when you were seeing it and you said that they were playing the trailer to Savage Streets.
Yeah.
That I loved that they were playing that, because when I was watching MaXXXine, I was like, oh, dude, this is total Savage Streets. So it made me really happy that someone else picked up on that enough to program the trailer before you saw it.
And they played the trailer for one of the other more comparable films, Vice Squad, with Wings Hauser. Yeah, no, it just really nailed that aesthetic of the grime of those kind of 80s Hollywood type of movies, and also the giallo stuff, because it really felt like New York Ripper, because there is a villain who wears black gloves while committing murders. So yeah, it was definitely Ty West showing those influences with those. And it is interesting to kind of see the evolution of MaXXXine as a character, because she's in Hollywood, she's trying to break in, she's going to be in a horror movie within the movie, when she gets a very threatening visit from good old Southern boy, private detective Kevin Bacon, and things just escalate from there. And also in the shadow of the Night Stalker killings in the 80s.
Yeah. I mean, I really liked it. I feel like MaXXXine was, for me at least, on the same level as X, where like I liked it. I know a lot of people were either a lot more disappointed or a lot more obsessed with it than I was, but it was more so for me, like I just liked a lot of pieces of it, but I still enjoyed it. I mean, Elizabeth Debicki as the female director behind Puritan 2, she was just everything. I loved her so much. She had that very like, I'm an artist and I need to protect my artistic vision, which usually makes my eyes roll. But for her, I was like, we need to protect your artistic vision. Like, Maxine, get your shit together, because we need to see her masterpiece that is Puritan too. And there was just so many like great performances there. Lily Collins also was in it for a couple of scenes and stole everything. Halsey was just absolutely everything as well. So there's some like really great bits. I love the influences. A lot like with X, the sudden kind of change of things in the third act was a bit like, I don't know. I'm always conflicted because I'm like, I love this, but also I don't know, because I love the third act shift up with Maxine. But you guys remember when we first talked about X, I even mentioned it. I was like, where the fuck did that connection of Maxine's backstory with her father come from? Like, it felt a little tacked on. And
I don't think it was tacked on in X, because that whole televangelist, he was basically in the background for the whole movie, like on radios or on TV. So it kind of not really tacked on, but it kind of was like the big, oh my gosh, when you find out that she's his daughter.
Yeah, and again, it could just be like hey, it's a Korea thing, and it's me, and it's my problem, and it's fine. But like, it always just felt like I was more interested in everything else, and so for me, it felt like a tack on. And that was the thing with Maxine. I was so into all the 80s stuff, all the filmmaking stuff, all these things that like when the preacher plot line came back up, I was just like, okay, like I'm okay with this. I wasn't as in love with it as everything else. I did like what they did with it though. There was some really cool stuff with like the kind of evangelical cult stuff that went on with that last, not trying not to spoil anything, but with the last bit. But no, I had a lot of fun with Maxine, and definitely, Mia Goth ate it, everything. It was great. But yeah, I still think Pearl is the crowning achievement of the trilogy, for me at least. And that's just for me.
For me, I think Maxine is the best of the three. I think and granted, I think they're all awesome. So this isn't, this is kind of like ranking the Quiet Place movies for me. But I think it goes for me, Maxine, X, Pearl.
Yeah. What about you, Jacob?
That's a tough question again, because they're just so different. But I'd probably have to say X is probably my favorite in terms of rewatchability.
We all have different favorites.
Yeah. Although, I mean, I like them all.
Yeah.
But I also do agree with Korea's critique that, I mean, I did like Maxine. It just is, some stuff did feel a little scattershot, but overall it worked.
Oh, and this isn't me saying I don't like the movies. That's just me saying like there's pieces where I'm just like, okay, I'm not as thrilled as I am with the rest of it. I think it's a great trilogy, and I have a lot of fun with it.
I'm happy it exists.
Yeah, the rewatchability of them is very high.
Oh yeah, and also I'm very happy that there was a character reading Fangoria in the movie within Maxine, or just within Maxine.
Yeah, that's fun.
Well, I think part of that tacked on thing, that the tacked on, what you say is tacked on at the ending, kind of goes with the 80s aesthetic of Maxine, because there was a lot of that going on back then, which leads us to our discussion.
Yeah.
I know you like that, king of segues. Korea, why don't you introduce our topic?
Yeah, so in honor of Maxine and getting completely enthralled with the vibes and the thrills of 80s cinema, we wanted to just kind of briefly talk about some of our favorite 80s retro films, films that were shot after the 80s that take place then, because I mean, I didn't live in it. I was born in 90, but the looks, the sounds, the styles, everything about the 80s is so very specific and iconic. It's hard not to be absolutely enthralled, and it's so identifiable. Like, you just need a couple of people with the right outfit and hair to go, oh, this takes place in the 80s. Gotcha.
Yeah, I feel a lot of it kind of plays into kind of classical pop cultural nostalgia, where every decade will be nostalgic for a few decades before it. Just look at how Happy Days was a huge deal in the 70s and 80s.
Right. Or that 70s show in the 90s, late 90s, early 2000s. And
no matter where you are, people will look fondly back at what came before.
It's going to be weird when there's like one that, because it's always a sitcom. There's Fresh Off the Boat was the 90s one, and then now we have that 90s show. So once When's our 2010s one coming?
It's coming any day now.
That'll be great. But what are some of your guys' favorite retro throwbacks?
For me, I actually took me a minute because it made me realize there's so many choices, specifically in the horror genre. But my personal favorite has to be Panos Cosmatos's Beyond the Black Rainbow, which is implicitly set in 1983. Yeah. Even though it's sort of a weird retro future version of 1983, with the Arborea Institute, but also reflective of kind of the, I guess, dystopic and yeah, just kind of depressing or darker aspects of that era, because a lot of it is set in the Arborea Institute, the scientific and psychological institute that back in the 60s was idealistic and was supposed to begin a new age of enlightenment, but everything went wrong, and now it's this brutalist building with this poor psychic girl being basically tormented by this evil psychiatrist, mad scientist. And I feel like Cosmatos was kind of cut to the core, because there's very little to no nostalgia in that there, but aesthetically it is very fitting, especially toward the end, because like there's a scene where they get out of the institute and there's like a couple of heshers, like metalheads, just hanging around a campfire drinking beers while listening to music, and then there's kind of a slasher setup with like guy picking them off. But yeah, no, but Beyond the Black Rainbow is one of my favorites of that, and again, it tells you right off the bat this is 1983.
I think one of my favorites, it doesn't explicitly say it's in the 80s, because it doesn't explicitly say it's in any time period, but it has the 80s vibe, is It Follows.
Oh, yeah.
Because they yeah, well, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of, they kind of purposely keep it ambiguous, with like, they're driving around 70s cars, but like you said, there's that clam reader thing, which is definitely modern. But what keeps it 80s for me is the soundtrack. It's just got such a Carpenter-esque, score to it. Yeah. And also just the supernatural aspect of this, plus the sexual revolution, of the time where, it's kind of just a metaphor for promiscuity catching up with you. So,
or I would even say kind of the backlash of the sexual revolution of the 70s.
Yeah.
Was the 80s. Yeah. Thanks, Reagan.
Yeah. And in a lot of ways, it feels like it's just kind of like an alternate universe version of the 80s, because, it's like all these different bits and pieces that don't quite add up, but it has that style and does have that setting. Plus, Nightmare on Elm Street, probably one of the biggest 80s horror movies, was a major influence, so it totally makes sense.
Plus, let's not forget, It Follows introduced us all to Micah Monroe, so...
Yep, ties all together.
Yep. Thank goodness for that. One of my favorites, because it's one that's so ingrained in 80s, but when you think about it, it's not one that's like all neon lights and big hairs and all that. It's American Psycho. Because that one,
I was just thinking that American Psycho, because the book American Psycho was actually written in the 80s.
Right.
So it's Mary Herron's treatment of it that actually is retro.
Yeah.
And so it becomes kind of heavy-handed when he's like, I'm going to go return some videotapes. It's the treatment of it that becomes retro.
Oh, I mean, it's not just the tapes, but the suits, the outfits, It's Wall Street, but with a psycho killer amongst them. And that's one of the things I really appreciate, because especially when we're thinking of like retro 80 movies, it's like, okay, movies where people wear very bright makeup and big hair and big outfits and all this stuff. And then it's like, well, that wasn't all of the 80s. That was like very specific pop culture influence parts of it. So like American Psycho does a really fantastic job of like not only portraying, but also critiquing Wall Street and all those yuppie bastards who bled this country dry and set up 40 fucking plus years of just like absolute fuck them,
and getting a reservation at the Dorsia.
Yeah, and how could you not flex when you see yourself in the mirror now because of that movie? I mean,
jeez. And Yeah, no, like I love a lot of these types of movies set in the 80s because they're anti-nostalgia movies, because movies like American Psycho and Beyond the Black Rainbow show the darker sides of that decade, with American Psycho in particular just being like, the high-speed rat race of Wall Street was incredibly hollow and all these people are fucking miserable.
Such brilliance. Like the kills are great, but it's definitely the exploration of like, y'all are miserable, but put on that face because this is what you're supposed to be achieving. Is just I still say one of the best scenes is Christian Bale and Reese Witherspoon sitting down and like, wait, are you breaking up with me? No, you're not. And it's just like what an encompassment of like that misery that the film portrays.
Yeah, and I also love like he keeps on renting the Texas Chainsaw Massacre on VHS, and he goes like, I got to return some tapes.
That's how you know it was really the 80s, because he had to keep renting it.
And speaking of throwbacks, this one's, I guess, a little bit more positive, but as of recent, Lisa Frankenstein has become a favorite of mine. And that one said on the tail end of the 80s in 89, my birth year. And yeah, it's a lot of fun, just kind of being a throwback 80s dark teen comedy, but also a Frankenstein story, and has a killer soundtrack. Between the synth score and some of the picks, like their cover of I Can See Clearly Now That Rain Is Gone. And yeah, no, just in general, like you got Catherine Newton being a teen pop Frankenstein. And yeah, the whole Lisa Frankenstein thing with the aesthetic, with like the kind of the style, but there's still gore and people get bits chopped up. So I thought that one was a lot of fun.
One that kind of is more retro 80s, but over in like across the pond, you'd say, is Censor.
Oh yeah,
which Censor I thought captured the whole. It captured the whole
video nasties
censorship. Yeah, the video nasties thing of there, where like it wasn't so much a time capsule of like visually, but the ideas and plot wise, you're like, okay, they were really doing this back then.
Oh man, I'll never forget seeing Censor in theaters at Alamo, and there's this scene where she's listening to the radio and Margaret Thatcher's doing a speech about the video nasties, and everybody in the audience started booing her.
Margaret Thatcher, the Reagan of England.
The worst. Yes.
Boo. Boo.
See, the 80s had a lot of bad stuff.
Yeah.
Unless you were a kid, then the 80s was probably all bad.
Absolutely. To kind of continue my thread of like 80s, but not so much heavy on like the pop references side of things, is Paranormal Activity 3.
Oh yeah. That one's totally retro.
It takes place in the 80s, but just like the going for the, not just the VHS style, but again, I will always applaud the practicality of like, well, how do we make this camera move? Oh, we attach it to a fan. Such a brilliant fucking bit.
I love the fan cam.
I am such a sucker. And I mean, that fan bit was so good, it almost caused the downfall of or not downfall, but like some of the issues with 4, which was like trying to do the Xbox bit, which was, although
I love that, the Connect bit.
Yeah.
I'll fight anybody. I still think that's pretty fun.
The imagery that it caused was really cool, of seeing like the green dots on like the entity. That was cool, but just the setup was just like, come on, that's not going to age well. So yeah,
it makes it a period movie.
Right. Yeah. It does make it a period movie. But I mean, Paranormal Activity 3 just like really captured what the spirit of like, and what they were doing with the franchise, and like took on the challenge of setting it in the 80s and made it like a fresh take on all of it, while still expanding and continuing the lore. I still think that's probably my favorite of the franchise. As of now, we'll see what when the next one comes out, whenever.
It could happen.
They're definitely going to do it another one. Give it another 5 years.
Have you guys seen Next of Kin, the latest one? Yeah, it's all right.
Oh wait, yes, I did see that. I did see that.
Yeah,
I thought it was okay.
It was fine. Um, let's rapid fire some fun ones. What are some ones that you guys recommend for people to seek out?
One that I'm not sure if it takes place in the 80s, but definitely has that aesthetic with the neon and the soundtrack and all is The Guest.
Ooh,
with your boy Dan Stevens.
Oh, the one that introduced me to my boy Dan Stevens.
Yeah,
that's where it all began.
The one that put him on the map.
Yeah. One of my favorites that technically is set in the 80s is Final Girls, because it's about a group of modern teens going into a slasher movie from the 80s. So technically they're in the 80s within the context of a movie that was made in the 80s. Down to the Betty Davis eyes soundtrack drop, and you got the Jason type killer, and kind of the clash between the modern teens who understand the rules of the genre versus the clueless 80s archetype characters. And it has a lot of heart because it's about Tysa Farmiga reuniting with her mom.
Malin Ackerman.
Yeah, Malin Ackerman. And it's still one of my favorites.
Oh, absolutely. For rapid fires, I'm going to lean into the retro wave aesthetic with it all and say Turbo Kid and Psycho Goreman are just like that, super hyper pop retro wave aesthetics while still being original with it. But also, so Turbo Kid and Psycho Goreman definitely hit that retro wave feel with it. But also to kind of go back to more of a grittier type title, especially if you like MaXXXine, highly recommend Knife Plus Heart. French kind of neo-noir kind of giallo slasher that takes place in with gay pornography. It's like Cruising meets like giallo slasher. It's such a blast. And dark and gritty and just grimy and you feel it's one of those ones where you feel the sweat. It's great.
We can't talk about horror movies set in the 80s without talking about Summer of '84.
Oh yeah,
where the kids,
brutal.
The kids, they think their neighbor is a serial killer, so they decide to start basically gathering evidence on him, which
Yep. And it gets intense.
Always ends well.
Always. I mean, I love a good kids on bikes movie, so it's nice to get a good one that isn't just like, hey, it's Stranger Things,
Speaking of, if you really want to go there, Stranger Things is completely what we're talking about.
Yeah.
I still haven't gotten back, man. I fell to that Netflix curse of watching everything in like a day or two, and then the next thing didn't come out for like a year or so. And when they were doing the recap, I was like, I don't remember any of this, and just never got back to it.
You know what happened with me? With Stranger, I watched the first season, and then was it the second season where the episodes were like 90 minutes long?
I think that was the most recent season, maybe.
Yeah, it was earlier than that, though. Earlier than maybe the most recent season is that way as well. But there was a season where the episodes stretched out to 90 minutes, and at that point, I tapped out. I'm like, you know what? I would rather watch an actual movie than a TV episode that's 90 minutes. So yeah, I mean, I'm not caught up on Stranger Things, but I remember from what I did watch that it was very much the 80s aesthetic.
That's why it's taken me so long to get through the Martin Freeman, Benedict Cumberbatch Sherlock series. It's just like, all right, this is a whole ass movie.
Well, that's different because the British series are that way, but each season is only 3 episodes.
Right. That's what helps. Yeah.
So that, when you've got like 6 episodes and they're, 6 to 8 episodes and they're 90 minutes each, you're like, oh God, kill me.
Well, 6 to 8 episodes, that's 3 seasons right there of that show.
Yeah. In the British ones. Yeah. I'm talking Stranger Things.
That's harder. Yeah. But I also with Sherlock, I have to remind myself, everyone ripped off this show after it came out. So when I'm watching, I'm like, no. This was the first one to do the text messaging and doing all the things that became like standard after that time. So, but they're fun.
since we're talking about Sherlock, maybe we've come to the end of this discussion.
Yeah.
So what did we miss? What are you guys, what are your favorite movies that have that? I kept coming back to the Neon Demon, although it's not even close to set in the 80s. Only the soundtrack, I guess, is the only thing that is. But what are your favorites? What did we miss? Let us know. You can find us on all the socials to let us know, or at iHorror.com. Our theme song is by Restless Spirit, so go check them out. And our artwork is by Chris Fisher, so go check him out. And I think the postscript on this episode is everybody see Longlegs because it's awesome.
Yeah.
And we'll see you in a couple weeks. So for me, James J. Edwards.
I'm Jacob Davison.
And I'm Jonathan Correa.
Keep your eye on horror.